First up will be approval of our agenda for the day. We can do that by consensus. Do we have any corrections or additions to the agenda? Any edits needed there? All right. Hearing none, our agenda will be approved as presented, and we'll move on to approval of the October 5th Commission minutes. We will take an actual motion for those from someone who was present at that meeting.
I motion to approve the minutes of the October meeting.
Okay, we have a motion from Monica. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second from Anthony. Can the second be from someone in there?
No, it should be.
Oh, that's right.
I'll second.
That's right.
Okay, we have a second from Bob instead. Are there any corrections needed to those minutes? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving those minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved, thank you. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting. I know there was one person who might be presenting. Ah, that must be you.
There I am, yes.
Go ahead and come up right for that microphone. State your name and any organization you represent for the record, and go ahead and let us know what's on your mind.
Thank you, Sean Grzeszewski. I'm resident of South Minneapolis and active with the Friends of Lake Hiawatha. Really appreciate your committee helping to move forward with the master plan for the Nokomis Hiawatha area. And I'm very excited about all the work with both Minneapolis Park Board and Hennepin County to work on Indigenous land acknowledgement. And so, because you guys are going to have your historical study coming up next time on December 7th, I was trying to brainstorm, could we try to have more groups come in, learn about the study, share what they're up to, figure out how to maybe help strengthen the study, and then when it's published, to use it as an opportunity to kind of sync up a lot of the land acknowledgement efforts with like Dakota County, Ramsey County, because it's a lot of meetings. If the Indigenous people have to go to meetings for every single city and county, it's better to kind of sync it up somehow to be able to work in a comprehensive way on restoring Dakota place names and perhaps moving toward Indigenous co-management of natural resources like they're doing across Canada and in other parts of the US. And so I just think there's other cities like Golden Valley working on renaming Bassett Creek, Wakpadon, and efforts with Bloomington to restore some of the history of the Dakota around Nine Creek. And so I think it would be a great chance to kind of synchronize a lot of these efforts. And you guys have a new Indigenous person liaison starting work with them at council in mid-November. So perhaps they could meet up with the new Indigenous liaison for the Minneapolis Park Board and kind of brainstorm how to maybe take advantage of this meeting you have coming up on December 7th. Without maybe we have dinner downtown somewhere after you share the study, we could all talk it over and kind of come up with some ideas. So I hope that's helpful for like how to make the most of the historical presentation thing. And then who's the consultant? I'd love to try to connect with whoever the consultant is working on it, because all the Indigenous groups I talk to haven't even heard of the study. And so it's like, I'd like to talk to them and see who they're reaching out to. So, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just very briefly talking to Emmett before we started the meeting, and I think basically the study is probably a little bit earlier in its stages than you might have thought.
Okay, sure.
So in terms of December 7th, were you guys planning an information item, just kind of letting us know where it's at that stage? Is that what that's about?
Yeah, Commissioner, and Sean, the December meeting purpose is really just to share the broadly where we're at with the study.
Okay,
we're
sure.
in the process. We certainly recognize all the ideas that you shared around naming conventions, co-management, coordinating, not wearing out the tribal bands.
Right. Yeah.
And those are all great points. We have spoken to a number of the groups that you've been emailing.
Oh, great.
And but we're really early in the process, so
Oh,
I
yes.
think that that sort of a more open forum type idea is something that we would want to do maybe a little bit later down the line than
Oh, sure.
in the December meeting. If we could just come into the December meeting and sort of let you know where we are and how things are going and what's next, like that might set the table for something that would be more coordinated like that. So stay tuned. We'll
Okay.
definitely keep you and also, feel free to call.
And we watched the presentation on the Minneapolis Park Board land acknowledgement last night on, it was fantastic, if I can get the slides, you could ask Carrie Ann Christensen for the slides, because
Sure.
they have an extremely solid approach that the Park Board in Minneapolis is doing, so.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And the other piece I mentioned, Emmett, is if we were gonna try to do some sort of workshop with some other groups and things, we are currently operating on a slightly reduced set of commissioners. We have a couple of vacancies and we're in the middle of the reappointments process. So in a couple of months, we should have a more full commission. We'd be able to have a wider group of participation. So I'm guessing something somewhere into the new year will be more effective than trying to do that in December.
Okay,
So-
for sure.
It's probably a good idea to work with you on some stuff, but I think our timeline is a little bit further out. So
Okay.
we'll be in touch.
Oh, thank you. You're good.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks. That'll be useful certainly to hear from some experts, because we've had a couple people bring up questions about land acknowledgement and stuff internally, and basically as a immigrant white man, I said, I don't know exactly how to do that correctly, so I'd like to hear from some other people that do. That'll be on the radar soon. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, excellent. That brings us then to our first business item, which will be the West Mississippi River Regional Trail, a Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant. And we have a familiar face back with us. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, I am Jessica Lee, Senior Parks Planner, and I'm here to present the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund for the West Mississippi River Regional Trail, the Coutolenc property for Three Rivers Park District. I just realized I don't have the clicker.
Oh, I do. I don't know why they give it to me, I'm not.
So the West Mississippi River Regional Trail is located along the northeast border of Hennepin County alongside the Mississippi River. It travels from Dayton through Champlin, Brooklyn Park, and Brooklyn Center. The trail is divided into 4 segments as shown in the map on the left. Segments C and D are open to the public in total 10 miles. Segments A and B will add an additional 10 miles once they're constructed. The map on the right shows segment A in greater detail, and the 1 acre Coutolenc property is located in segment A in the city of Dayton, near Gooden Park. This map shows a close-up of the Dayton segment. All the land that's in public ownership is shown in green. Subject property is circled in yellow. And Three Rivers is pursuing fee title for much of this segment of the trail for many reasons. They want to protect the Mississippi River, preserve and improve wildlife habitat and water quality, and make the river accessible to the public. Acquiring the entire parcel will allow Three Rivers to build a wider, more scenic regional trail border away from the road, but also up from the river where needed to further protect it, while creating important river touch points for the public. This map shows the future interconnectedness of all the public land along the stretch of the river with multiple local parks, the Mississippi West Regional Park, and connections to the Diamond Lake and Medicine Lake regional trails. This area is also within the Mississippi National River Recreation Area, which is a designation that helps protect the river's natural, cultural, and scenic resources. And the Coutolenc property, shaded in yellow on this map, I apologize, it's very light, is partially wooded and contains 135 linear feet of Mississippi River shoreline. There's a home on the property that will be removed. Three Rivers will use Better Futures Minnesota, which is a nonprofit reuse company, to deconstruct the home and salvage as much as possible. The property was appraised at $525,000 and the seller has agreed to this amount. The total acquisition cost is $640,000. The total grant amount will be $480,000 and Three Rivers Park District will provide the 25% match. And after this acquisition, there will be approximately $12.6 million remaining in the council's PAOF account, including $8.2 million in Parks and Trails Legacy Fund and $4.3 million in Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. Our rationale for recommendation is that this project is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, the West Mississippi River Regional Trail Long Range Plan, and Three Rivers is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. Our recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $480,000 to Three Rivers Park District to acquire the 1.1 acre parcel located at 16590 Dayton River Road in Dayton, Minnesota for the West Mississippi River Regional Trail, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restricted covenant on behalf of the council. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, thank you. I will mention that, I don't know about the rest of you, but in what I have printed out, not all of the exhibits are in the printout, but they are in what was posted online, which I have on my phone if anyone has questions about the actual like appraisals and board approvals and purchase agreements and that kind of stuff. I have a digital copy. Any questions? I was just wondering, when you're talking about the full parcels, roughly how deep are those parcels from the road to the river?
I don't know if you can tell from that image. I don't have the actual dimensions, but they're very long and narrow.
I mean, like roughly, we're talking 200 feet, 1,000 feet. Do we have any idea? And you said something, I think, about the frontage being 135, so it's probably,
135, yeah.
what is that, 450-ish?
About 400 feet.
Yeah, that's pretty well. Okay. That's not huge. Anything else? Or motions?
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of, I don't have it with me this time, sorry.
Monica, I believe, moves the proposed action from the staff report.
Yes.
I'll second.
We have a second from Bob. Any discussion on that? Oh, well, I have to state it first. That motion is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $480,000 to the Three Rivers Park District to acquire a 1.1 acre parcel located at 16590 Dayton River Road in Dayton, Minnesota for West Mississippi River Regional Trail, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restricted covenant on behalf of the council. Any discussion?
Looks like a nice addition.
I agree, and this looks, I think basically any discussion we had on this happened on the like 3 other parcels we did for the same thing recently, so all looks pretty straightforward. Anything further? Okay, all in favor of that motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Jessica. Our second business item is the Battle Creek Regional Park Long Range Plan for Ramsey County, and we have Colin Kelly to present that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, commissioners. Good to see you. I'm Colin Kelly, planning analyst here in the Regional Parks Unit, and I'm here to present the Battle Creek Regional Park Long Range Plan on behalf of Ramsey County. Scott Yonke and Ben Karp, both from Ramsey County, are here today and may respond to questions after the presentation as needed. So, Battle Creek Regional Park is located in the east central part of the regional park system in southeast Ramsey County, including portions of the city of St. Paul and Maplewood. The figures you see here are figures 1, 2, and 3 in the staff report. Ramsey County's portion of Battle Creek Regional Park can generally be divided into 2 main segments: the Battle Creek and Pig's Eye segments. The Battle Creek segment offers multiple recreation amenities, such as picnic areas, a swimming area, an off-leash dog park, winter sports, and a visitor center, as well as maintained trail systems. It is the main focus of this long-range plan. This plan was developed to act as a separate guiding document from the Pig's Eye Lake Long-Range Plan Amendment approved by the Council in April 2021. That plan amendment addressed natural resource and public safety improvements. Partner engagement. Ramsey County started the long-range planning efforts for the Battle Creek Regional Park plan in spring 2019, almost 5 years ago, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Stakeholder agencies are the key decision makers throughout the planning process and were primarily involved through the Project Management Team, or PMT. The PMT is defined as the decision-making body for the project. However, all decisions were informed by feedback from the community. The PMT guided the planning effort by providing recommendations for approaches and decisions at key project milestones. The PMT consisted of representatives from Ramsey County, the cities of St. Paul and Maplewood, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, SRF Consulting, and Wakan Tipi Awanyangapi, formerly known as the Lower Phelan Creek Project. Following 5 PMT meetings in late 2019 and early 2020, and regular communications throughout the development of the plan, the county received resolutions and letters of support from Ramsey County Parks and Recreation Commission, the cities of St. Paul and Maplewood, and the District 1 Southeast Community Organization. These are attachments 1 through 4 in the staff report. Moving on to public engagement. The goals of the engagement were to work directly with the public throughout the process, to use an equity lens to amplify the voices of communities traditionally left out of the planning process, to connect with a broad cross-section of community stakeholders, and to deploy a defined communications and messaging strategy. Recommendations of public engagement included balancing recreation with natural passive uses, improving bike and pedestrian connectivity, wayfinding, and play areas, connecting people, and especially youth, to the park, providing restrooms and water fountains, protecting the bluffs and preserving natural areas, and better storytelling. The equity analysis. Relative to the rest of the county, the area surrounding the regional park is more racially diverse, with a population that also skews slightly younger. The focus area included census tracts within a half mile of the park. The focus area has larger populations of Asian or Pacific Islanders, Black or African Americans, and Hispanic or Latino people. Some of the engagement locations and events included Monktown Marketplace, Battle Creek Pavilion, Eritrean Muslim Council event, Southeast Community Organization community event, and more. Some of the themes from underrepresented members and groups included prioritizing beginner to intermediate level outdoor programs, introductory outdoor recreational activity programs, and the redevelopment of waterworks. Other themes included adding a nature center, increasing fishing opportunities, and creating safe access to the regional park. As you will see in the next slide, input from underrepresented community members helped shape and influence the plan's development. Development concept. One of the proposed amenities is a multi-use trail connecting the Battle Creek and Fish Creek segments of the park. The Battle Creek segment is depicted on the right side of the slide. This is figure 4 in the staff report. The Fish Creek segment is about 2.5 miles south of the Battle Creek segment. It's depicted in figure 5 in the staff report. Recreational development for the regional park includes a mix of active and passive opportunities, including walking, hiking, biking, cross-country skiing, bird watching, canoeing, kayaking, and interpretation. Existing trailheads and pedestrian access points have planned enhancements to improve site amenities, as well as safe access to the park. Some of the major amenities proposed include a multi-season trailhead and nature center, new trailhead locations, waterworks redevelopment or reconstruction, the extension of existing trails, safe pedestrian access points, interpretive signage along 3 learning trail corridors, improvements to the off-leash dog area, and more. Long-term, providing additional access to the Pig's Eye Lake segment is a goal, though the county recognizes that access to Pig's Eye Lake cannot be implemented until all appropriate investigations into environmental contamination are complete and mitigation strategies are fully implemented. In partnership with multiple stakeholders, the county is committed to addressing the environmental issues surrounding Pig's Eye Lake. The county will continue to work with stakeholders and the community to develop concepts for future recreational activities that are safe and compatible with land uses in the area. The total estimated acquisition cost associated with the Battle Creek Regional Park long-range plan is $58,754,945. The majority of this estimated cost is associated with the Mississippi River Bluffs open space, a narrow 2-mile strip of steep-sloped bluff land paralleling the east side of Highway 61. The county is proposing to acquire approximately 224 acres with an anticipated timeline of 20-plus years in the Mississippi River Bluffs open space. The total estimated improvement cost is $30,150,000. Trailhead development and redevelopment at Suburban Pond, Upper Afton Road, Lower Afton Road, Park Entrance Road, Bluff Top, and Fish Creek represent the majority of these costs, totaling $16 million. Total estimated annual operations and maintenance costs are $878,000. Operations and maintenance costs are based on a combination of past practice, work done in other park systems, and expert opinion. Operations and maintenance costs may require additional evaluation after implementation of new infrastructure. Taken together, the total estimated cost associated with the Battle Creek Regional Park Long Range Plan is $89,602,945. The rationale for the proposed actions, coming up on the next slide, is that the Battle Creek Regional Park Long Range Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1, as well as other council policies, including Thrive MSP 2040. The proposed action before you, then, is that the Metropolitan Council first approve Ramsey County's Battle Creek Regional Park Long Range Plan, and second, to require Ramsey County, prior to initiating any development of the regional park, to send preliminary plans to the Environmental Services Assistant Manager at the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division. And with that, I will stand for any questions you might have and remind you that Ramsey County staff is on hand as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. First, I was just wondering if you could clarify, so since this is updating an existing plan from a long time ago, and I know there are some boundary changes in it, I wanted to make sure we understand which things are additions compared to the existing plan. I know there's this bit about City of Maplewood owned properties on the Fish Creek portion. Are there others that are additions in terms of boundary?
Mr. Chair, indeed there are. One of the other locations that's identified within the plan is called Suburban Pond Open Space, just to the north of the existing Battle Creek segment.
Okay, the number 4 on figure 3.
I believe that's about 32 acres. There's other properties within the Mississippi River Bluffs open space that's also planned for addition into the park. I believe that totals nearly 224 acres. Future acquisitions, some of those properties are already in the City of St. Paul ownership, and at some point those may be moved into Ramsey County and the regional park itself. So it's those 3 main areas, Mr. Chair: Fish Creek, Suburban Pond Open Space, and the Mississippi River Bluffs Open Space.
I can't remember what our actual action was before, but I know some the stuff along the river was discussed the last time we had an update to this. Did we draw them actually in then, or was that still they were trying to figure out the details then?
Mr. Chair, good question. Prior to the Pig's Eye Lake Long Range Plan Amendment, you may recall that these proposed acquisitions were brought into the regional park policy plan via the 2020 system additions process. That might be when you recall hearing about those 3 particular sets of properties or areas in relation to Battle Creek Regional Park.
Okay, probably. So we may have identified them as like search areas or something rather than an update to the long range plan. I'm thinking probably. Or maybe it was just sort of for our information, we're going to bring this to you later. I know they talked about them, but I don't remember what we actually did about them. Okay.
Mr. Chair, in those system addition processes, one of the things that happens at that time are major boundary expansions, right? And so those were identified as major boundary expansions in the 2020 system additions process.
Okay. Okay, so we were saying, not just as a search area, we were saying for this particular unit, we will be doing some stuff here, but we hadn't actually drawn a line.
Indeed.
Okay. Not going crazy. Other commissioner questions?
Well, you know, I kind of remember the big lake. I was like, but where is it? So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make probably a completely silly question and make a fool of myself, but we're approving the plan and we are having a, total estimate acquisition for the regional park. This is for the possible acquisition costs coming, because we already have a park there, correct?
Yeah.
So, okay, so the 58 million is for the thing that we might buy to enhance park in the future.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dillenberg, that is correct, yeah. I think some $57 million of that $58 million acquisition cost is related to properties within that Mississippi River Bluffs open space.
Thanks.
I see you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Colin. The plan is an exciting one, I think. Those bluffs and that part of the world and those trails are beautiful areas. So I'm certainly supportive of that. When I look at what I gather from your presentation, you had pretty darn good participation by the community. Is that correct? In setting this up and approving the plan before it got to us. As I look at the equity sense of this, I see that you've got multiple language, signage, and safety identified in here as elements. I guess my question is, while I read or see main focuses on trails, are there things, are there spaces, are there amenities designed to meet the needs of emerging populations in that area? It doesn't come through loud and clear to me that you're modifying or creating amenities for new participants in that field.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mueller, yeah, I'd be happy to start to address that, and perhaps some of the Ramsey County staff could add to it if need be. A couple of things I could add. One of the things I mentioned in the presentation was a desire for additional programming. Programming is something that we don't necessarily require within long-range plans. It's certainly something that implementing agencies include quite often as recommendations, as something that they intend to do within regional parks, park reserves, regional trails, and the like. But that was really a focus within this particular long-range plan, is the desire to do more programming. And part of that programming would be around beginner and intermediate level outdoor recreation programming around cross-country skiing, off-road cycling, mountain biking, and other types of opportunities like that. I also mentioned additional fishing opportunities were of interest to a number of groups, but especially those who were identified through the equity analysis. And so the county has an intention to work with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and their Fishing in the Neighborhood program to provide some additional opportunities in that space. Another one of the identified groups of great interest to Ramsey County and to the park space are youth. And so the county is making a real intentional effort to create these learning trail corridors that will directly connect to the local elementary and middle schools that are nearly adjacent to the regional park. So it seems to me they're doing quite a bit that directly connects the equity analysis with the development concept.
Follow-up question, Colin. At some point in the history of this area, there was a ski jump up there. Is the ski jump still there? And is that part of the program?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I have to say, I don't know about the ski jump, but perhaps Scott or Ben could say a little bit more about that.
Go ahead.
I used to jump there on 494, I was a jumper.
I'm showing my age for sure, I suppose, but I'd like to know what's happening there.
Yeah, hi, Ben Carp, Ramsey County. The foundations to the ski jump are still there. They are currently along a off-road cycling trail. The county doesn't have any plans to reopen that ski jump.
Okay.
We do have the winter recreation area, some other programs and things that are deeper in the plan for varied programming. There was an interest in winter fat biking. The county is already beginning to explore that in other areas as well as Battle Creek. Colin already mentioned the nature trails. We had a representative go to the National Parks Conference, and Anoka County actually presented on one of their virtual nature trails, and we thought that was really cool. So we're already looking at ways to lower the bar to entrance, making it more accessible. People can just come learn, but also work with the schools and other groups that would like to provide input on those nature trails. The Outdoor Recreation Center, Nature Center, that's not fully developed, but that has plenty of room to change and grow with the needs of the community.
Thank you.
You mentioned the opportunity for fishing in the neighborhood expansion. Does that rely on the possibly relatively long-term improvements to Pig's Eye Lake, or are those in some other locations more inland?
There are actually a number of, they are stormwater ponds, put up by the Battle Creek Pavilion in the northeast portion of the site. There are stormwater ponds that were developed by Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District, and we do find a number of easy to catch warm water fish in those ponds, such as sunfish and some small bass. And in the initial conversations with the DNR, that seemed like a good spot to introduce those programs. It would also be a great area to teach them about natural systems. There's just a lot of opportunity there. So it does not rely on Pig's Eye. Pig's Eye would be great, but that is definitely a very long-term portion of that.
Yeah. And for anyone who may be watching, it's worth also calling out, because we had some previous conversations about this. We're talking about shoreline access to Pig's Eye being related to this, but some of the things that actually happen within the water body are basically out of scope of what we're looking at in the regional park. It's a resource that's connected but not directly controlled by this stuff. That involves some other agencies and some other processes and things that get into things that we don't have visibility into. So it's just worth noting because it gets complicated. Other questions? Yes, Anthony.
The estimated $59 million, does that include the cost of a future trailhead? Or is that just land costs in terms of the dollars that are inside the plan?
I have to look at page 187 there.
I believe 59 was the acquisition number. There was
Just
another
that.
number for development.
Figure. $30 million.
I'll give you the thousand for trailhead development. Yeah, it's development, nature center development, programming, corridor studies.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, the overall improvement costs that were estimated, provided on this previous slide. Here, the trailhead development, the nature center is within that $30,150,000 cost estimate.
In the nature center, so as you all look at a nature center there, this is similar to Tamaracks. How do you all envision this nature center fitting into the kind of system?
Yeah, so nature center may not be the best way to categorize it because even in the plan we have stated that we don't exactly know the final use. Could be nature, could be outdoor recreation, could be have some indoor recreation. It could include rentals for the different recreation activity, or, just free use of, have a fleet of some mountain bikes, some skis, some snowshoes, so it's not fully defined, but I don't think the focus is solely as a nature center.
And I was wondering what Monica was getting at with these acquisition costs. Since this is an update to an existing plan, and we've added new property to the boundary, what portion of these estimated costs already existed versus what are related to our new additions? Do we know what those estimates were coming into this with the old plan? Approximately.
So you're asking about the maintenance costs?
No, I'm wondering about the acquisition and development estimates. Like we have, at our level, our total system plan thing estimates a cost to acquire and develop the system, and we had some sort of a calculation that included this park unit in addition to everything else in the region. I'm wondering what numbers we had estimated for Battle Creek before versus how these numbers look compared to that. Like what is our net system increase?
Scott may know more about what it was before than I, so.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, Scott Yonke, Ramsey County Parks, Chair, staff. So as far as the total cost, I do not have the total cost of what was existing, but what I can tell you is the existing plan was originally developed in 1981. So at that time, there was still a lot of talk about how that park is being, could be expanded or acquisition at that time. So that the cost that was listed in the original plan, I believe there needs to be some flexibility to that because it doesn't accommodate for the long-term use. So now what we're looking at in this plan is, it is an amendment to it, but it's almost like a new plan at that point. So we're looking at the cost of those numbers right now moving forward. And yes, it does include some existing numbers in there, but I don't have a number for you right now.
Sure, and frankly, Colin, this might actually be more of a question on that council side because we're not looking at what number they gave us in 1981, it's what number have we been calculating based on what they gave us in 1981 recently, which I don't know how that math even happens. Someone did that at some point, probably not since the last time we did a park policy plan system plan update.
Chair and commissioners, the cost to complete the system was developed in coordination with the park agencies. So we looked at all of the long-range plans and we consulted, knowing that like a plan from 1981 is going to be significantly out of date. And so there was some professional judgment that went into that. But it was really a unit by unit aggregation to come up with that number, the 2.1 billion.
So I may even be asking a question that's not really statistically valid with how you came up with that, possibly.
There was a systematic methodology, but it was a rough estimate. We worked with a demographer to estimate the acquisition costs within the MUSA and then the land value costs outside of it. And it was we used a single number for each of those two estimates. And then we multiplied it out based on the acreage remaining to acquire. So it was, Chair, coarse estimate, but it was, I think, one of the better estimates that's been done because it was one that went through each of the long-range plans. And did that sound like I was bragging? And it was one that was sort of substantiated by going agency by agency, unit by unit.
Okay, so we looked at
Each
a
of the
unit
long-range
basis, but it's
plans.
not really at the same level as when we create a long-range plan, so
It's at the
Basically-
system level. yeah.
basically I'm hearing my question probably doesn't really make sense, and that's why you're all looking at me funny. I'm okay with that. Yes, Anthony?
Maybe this is a question for us, Tony, and for you. You know, the thing about long-range planning, and I think especially with as much kind of, you know, commitment and validation and investigation into the needs for these types of programming, and because Ramsey County is my park, and because programming is not what you've done, you know what I mean? Like you manage land and done that for, you don't do programming. Would it be appropriate for us to ask for some estimate to actually deliver on the programming that they're talking about? Because we've done an estimate of budget for operational costs for the land, but again, to make this successful, we have to deliver on this programmatic aspect of it, and we have to deliver on programmatic aspect relative to delivering on equity, which is gonna cost more, you know, and actually our commitment to equity is overspending to receive the outcomes we want. You know, is that something that we would bring forward as part of long-range plans or master plans relative to this, especially with, you know, we're asking them to bake that in, and simultaneous to that, is it on us to push the legislature or someone to actually help deliver those dollars, because, you know what I mean? I mean, there's something there where we're doing all this, and actually neither one of us is held accountable for it. And they show up and then we beat them up on equity, or somebody will, you know, if it's not us, it'll be someone. But again, this idea of, do we actually do an estimate to the best of our ability on what it costs for us to deliver on equity, to create the programming that they've already identified in a master plan, and everyone does it in the long-range master plans, talks about the programmatic work that's gonna happen, you know, so is there...
I hear what you're getting at, however, I think it's probably a little more complicated than that, because the programming stuff, they give us an idea of some of the programming goals they're coming up with when they're thinking about the long-range plan and what facilities are needed to support that. However, the programming aspects in detail are also significantly more agile than that, where their board can say, hey, we have a new idea for programming each biennium and pass a budget that funds that, which may or may not be related to any update to a long-range plan. They might be working on something, you know, these plans live, as we've seen, for 30, 50 years, and programming, we want to be significantly more adaptable than that. So we don't want someone to come back and say, hey, I have a long-range plan amendment because I want to offer new programming, but it doesn't have any capital changes to it. So it would be nice to know those estimates, but I'm inclined to say that maybe long-range plans are not the right vehicle for doing it, and I'm not sure what is. Maybe it's even just not even having them actually like do a report. Maybe it's more kind of some sort of reporting information item thing of, hey, here's some of our goals, here's sort of what it's at. Kind of just talking to us once a year rather than a long-lived document.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Do you know what I mean? It might
Yeah,
not really fit into this.
Well, I mean, the reason I ask, because we actually asked for an operational estimate,
We do.
right, on the $59 million, 8 plus $30 million investment. And I think there also are some calculations, and I'll say for Ramsey County, especially with the new Battle Creek acquisition, as we do this, we're looking at increased revenue streams too. I mean, this is the other thing that's happening, is that as we build this out, we're actually looking at the value, right, from a return on investment standpoint here, either in terms of increased operational costs. We were just teasing about trail passes, and then we will make some money if we just convince people, remind people that you actually need a trail pass for Battle Creek now. You know, so I think that that's one of the things I'm seeing in our park systems, is that there is, and you know, in Battle Creek Park, it actually is, for those of them, it is an amazing park. And with this extension and acquisition, and we bring pigs by online, I mean, there's something monumentally, you know, opportunistic for us in terms of how we do this. And I think that we will shore this up with community members that are going to pay for additional access. We're going to extend the system. Eventually, we're going to fight over, do mountain bikers need trail passes? I mean, this is a whole nother thing. Like, you know what I mean? I'm looking down line, and I think as they look down line, how are we making estimates on increased revenue, right?
Yeah.
Are we making estimates, and then with that, the kind of programming that we're gonna offer. So that's what I feel like we're doing from a design and utilization standpoint, and are we also doing something similar relative to?
I can say that in that annual operations and maintenance cost, there was a programming line item. I don't know how well it responds to the continued revenue or the equity outreach, because that is a more difficult aspect. So I guess we could try to get more granular, but we haven't at this time.
Is there an opportunity in terms of, as the implementing agencies, even interact? Because I would say our partners at Three Rivers have done a little more of it, right? In terms of, doing those kind of things and fees and.
I think what I'm inclined to say, Anthony, is I know council staff does regular workshop kind of meetings with each of the implementing agencies outside of our commission meeting schedule. So maybe I just kind of refer this over to staff as figuring out some more details about how program funding works might be a good topic for conversation for those, and then bring it to us if you have requests for input on certain things later. But I know that's something that the DNR has been talking about a lot, of how do we do our long-term funding and make sure it's sustainable, and we might have to do some system level talks about that as well, figure out how do we meet our goals with funding things, and is there anything new we should access. But I think probably getting some information from the implementing agencies first would be useful to find out, okay, what do you actually know, what are you capable of knowing, and how does that relate to the things that we are trying to ask you? Because they know what's even possible, and then we can figure out what's reasonable to ask for. That make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I don't know, I'm kind of thinking this might be related to, but for example, in the operation maintenance, that is 870,000 per year. We're talking about, I'm assuming this year, and we don't know what's gonna happen next year. So I think you mentioned there is a room for, increase the value of doing the maintenance cost or expense. I would think that might help also with programming, because I know the harder part of all these projects is how much are you going to spend every year, and how much staffing do you need, and how much budgeting are you going to need. And I'm sure that's going to keep changing over the years. So if we have estimate of how much, I don't even think it's percentage, because it all depends on the economy, but it will help with programming, which I think that's where you're going to. So not a question, I'm saying I would like to see more money in operation maintenance, because I know you will need it, pretty much.
I think actually a correction to that number is not for this year. That's what the annual cost would be if we build out everything that's in this plan. So that'd be maintaining trails that don't yet exist, right?
That's correct.
So, but it's value on this year estimates, that's what I mean.
Yes, it's still a today's dollars
it will
of
be like-
future stuff.
Then we're going to be back now it's not 1981, so we don't know how much it was, because I love this park. I don't know how many years it's gonna take to finish it. So if we're talking 2-3 years, that might be correct. But if it's like 5, 10 years, 15 years, I have no idea what the future holds for us on that one. So that's what I'm thinking, we could try to make not a future projection, but have a a little plus, say, well, estimated in 2023 up to reconsideration. I don't know, something like that. Yeah, because I mean, you see it in your grocery list. You need more now than what you need in January. So I'm just guessing this is going to be hard. But I love the plan. I love the park, and I wish I can meet it one of these days. How it is planned.
I think you might be asking the park staff to do economic forecasting that's beyond their abilities, but I know what you're asking.
I believe in all of you. You can do it.
Yeah. Tell us what the economy is going to do in 2060, please.
Yes.
Tess, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I guess I had some questions about preserving and caring for these new additions. We were talking about fishing, and I saw that in the comments area, right around there is the Pig's Eye dump and the wastewater treatment plant. is there money for research and maintenance and also water testing for these communities that will be using this area as fishing? And is that something that can be kind of like a continuous funding for that type of research? I guess my concern there is that kind of gets pushed to the side and then it's like free fishing, you know, maybe some of those areas, being that they're so close to, or essentially surrounded by this wastewater plant and the dump. Just,
I
I
can
have
answer
some
part
thoughts
of that
about that.
first and then see if there's anything the county wants to add. Testing for contaminants that are present in fish flesh and offering consumption advisories for human health is actually under the jurisdiction of the Minnesota Department of Health.
Okay.
So that happens at the state level for any significant fishery.
Okay.
And the data that they collect is published in a combination of Department of Health information and on the DNR website. So like if you go to the DNR's Lake Finder application and look up a water body, whether it's a lake or a river, they have both, and then pull up fish consumption advisories, that pulls data from Department of Health. So most of that's actually happening at the state level regardless of the jurisdiction of the individual like parks where you might find that kind of stuff.
Okay, great.
Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just add that the area you're talking about is the Pig Eye Lake area, and a lot of that public access, safety, fishing studies still need to be done, and that was discussed in the Pig's Eye plan, so there would definitely be more planning, stakeholder involvement, everything along those lines in the future, so that's not addressed as part of this plan.
Okay, thank you.
And it's, much of it is not the responsibility of Ramsey County, it's some other things too. Yes, Emmett?
Chair and Commissioners, I just wanted to mention that I wanted to thank Ramsey County for really coordinating with the Metropolitan Council on this one and really on your question. There is an active task force that is working now. I think they just started a couple months ago on this area in the Pig's Eye area, and that isn't exclusively in like the park area. It goes across ownership into City of St. Paul owned land, railroad land. There's a number of landowners down there that these folks know better than I, but I just wanted to mention that that is an active topic that is being worked on.
And the council's own wastewater plant.
The council's own wastewater plant. Did I forget to mention that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else or motions or things like that?
I'd move the recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion for the recommendation from the staff report. Is there a second for that?
I second.
Okay, motion by Bob, second from Monica. That motion is that the Metropolitan Council approve Ramsey County's Battle Creek Regional Park Long Range Plan and require Ramsey County prior to initiating any development of the regional park to send preliminary plans to the Environmental Services Assistant Manager at the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division. Discussion on that motion. Kind of waffled into before. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor of that motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That will bring us on to our information items for the day. We have two. Our first is our equity nudge of the month. Recommendations for the 2050 Regional Parks Policy Plan from region-wide Young Leaders Collaboration. We have a few people presenting. Go ahead and introduce yourselves for the record and which organization you're with if it's not the
Mr.
council.
Chair,
Yes.
before we get started, may I just say that I'm gonna have to leave about a quarter after. I don't mean to be impolite. I just wanna let you know that
Oh, okay.
I'll be leaving at 5:15.
Sounds good. Thank you, Bob. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Mulki Haile. I'm here with my colleague, Darcie Vandegrift, and today we're presenting some recommendations from the 2023 Met Council Young Leaders Collaboration. Okay, so for today's conversation, I'll begin with giving a brief introduction about what the Young Leaders Collaboration is, and then we'll move on to our recommendations. including natural systems, recommendations surrounding park access and safety, as well as recommendations about people-park connection. And then we'll end with a discussion. So, the Young Leaders Collaboration Process. To give an overview of what the Young Leaders Collaboration is, it's an engagement for the Regional Development Guide that happened beginning January through May. A lot of this was led by Darcie Vandegrift and also was co-led by Gabrielle Olvera. So the recruitment for this process was finding leaders ages 14 to 24 from 5 different organizations. The background of these leaders is as well as diverse, but they're diverse and they also came from diverse areas of the region. We had young leaders in Carver, Dakota, Hennepin, Ramsey, and Scott counties, and they also lived in rural, urban, and suburban communities. So when designing the workshop process, we came up with activities that would get them acquainted with the council. So we had them study council authorities, as well as we had them select priority topics and conduct interviews in their independent research through interviews. This amounted to 20 hours of workshops altogether, and at the end we had them present to the Council of the Whole, Committee of the Whole in May of this year. All of these organizations had interest in parks, but we'll specifically be focusing on a group called ESI, Environmental Stewardship Institute, I believe. Also Friends of the Mississippi River, because this was a priority for them. So, for the park-specific themes that we'll be discussing today, they were generated through a few different, differently. One of them being that, as I said, we'll be focusing on ESI's recommendations, as well as their interviews they conducted in the community, and then also the feedback from the 4 other organizations. And then lastly, we'll also be focusing on their reflections from the 2021 visitor study, as well as their reflections of their stories and the council authorities. I'll turn over to my colleague, Darcie Vandegrift soon, but just to reiterate, the themes were natural systems protections and conservation, parks accessibility, and then the people to park connection.
Thanks, Mulki. Darcie Vandegrift. I'm in community development. My colleague Mulki is an intern in local planning assistance, and we worked together on this project this spring, along with some other colleagues. So before I jump into these recommendations, I do want to point out that there's a couple of opportunities for parks and for MPOS with the Regional Development Guide and update to the Regional Parks Policy Plan. One, of course, you've already been deeply embedded in and working on already, which is kind of updating the Regional Parks Policy Plan. But in the recommendations from the young leaders, we also see an opportunity for you to think about how what recommendations to protect the regional park and trail system you would like to see made to land use policy as it appears in the Regional Development Guide. And so there's sort of 2 opportunities, and we'll show you a few ways that young leaders talk to us about this. So let's talk first about some of the things that young leaders said about natural system protection and conservation. So they really emphasized, and as Mulki pointed out, we worked with leaders across the region, some of which were in urban areas where there wasn't a lot of existing land that could be moved into development, from open space into development, and others were in Carver and Scott County where they talked about kind of development happening. So let's talk first, let's share some of the things that they had to say about open space and land use. So those are your quotes on the right. So in my neighborhood, there's been a lot of development, and some of this development will be at the wetland area, and we're currently lacking wetland in Minnesota. Cities should stop cutting down trees. They made roads, and they're still cutting down trees. The trees I saw every day, I came home and they were gone. They started construction for new roads and cut the trees. Lower down the construction because we need the trees. Spaces for community garden and habitat conservation should be important elements of comprehensive plans for local governments. Water and noise pollution in parks should be prevented through land use policy. And it upsets me because there used to be a lot of open land where kids used to be able to play for free. And as you well know, residents of the region don't experience our region as regional parks completely separate from other open space and conservation concerns. And so the Environmental Stewardship Institute talked about how do we protect the regional park system through both regional parks policy, but they also talked about land use goals in the larger regional development guide. So some of the things that they wanted to recommend was efficient land use to protect open space. In other words, that meant for them thinking about housing density, thinking about walkable communities, things like that. They also wanted to see community gardens and habitat preservation through comprehensive plans, so both in development of transit and in other kinds of local development, thinking about native habitat, and also how can that native habitat then protect the non-human species that are part of the regional park and trail system. A second area connected to natural systems is their reflection on litter and pollution. That is both a natural systems concern for them and also, in their view, a barrier to park and trail visitation. So some of the things that they said is something that keeps me from visiting parks is littering in parks. We want animals and plants to be healthy in our region, free of the effects of pollution and litter. Parks have litter and water pollution. There's algae, dead fish, and it smells bad due to fertilizer contamination. And these are issues for Como Park and Como Lake with litter, plastic pollution, and water quality. This creates a barrier to people accessing parks because they do not want to be exposed to garbage or illness due to unhealthy water and air. And we should note here that the 2021 visitor study also articulated a concern with maintenance and litter issues, so this is not a new topic, but it was notable that this was one thing that they underlined and emphasized and explored in their community interviews. And so some of the goals that they wanted to set around there is that we see complaints about litter in the visitor study decrease between 2021 and 2025. Our visitor study was done in 2021 and there'll be another one in 2025. Our parks and trails receive funding to maintain them free of litter or pollution, and that our parks are biodiverse, clean, and well kept.
Okay. Now moving on to the recommendations around park accessibility and safety. The young leaders had many quotes regarding transportation and needing better transportation to get to places that they need to go, such as school and work, but they also mentioned that parks need to improve access. Starting with some of the quotes on the right side of the screen, a young leader said, "Transportation infrastructure does not adequately serve parks. In our interviews, we found that people who bike or walk feel that the roads aren't safe. Cars don't know what to do when there's bikers around. There are dangerous roads and intersections for cyclists and pedestrians to reach regional parks. A stoplight at a busy intersection would help." Another young person said, "There is very little public transit to parks. The Met Council does not adequately coordinate transportation planning, public transit, and regional parks planning. If the park is far away and people have to bike/walk and don't have a safe way to do it, it most likely will choose not to go. Having designated sidewalks and bike lanes are important, as well as drivers being aware of these sidewalks and bike lanes to make it safer for everyone." And lastly, someone said, "If there's public transportation like buses, it makes it much easier to get to parks, especially because for a long time I didn't have a car." So many of these quotes spoke of the dangers of being a pedestrian, but also talked about how there needs to be coordination between transportation planning as well with regional parks planning. So one of the goals that was derived from these experiences is our parks are accessible for the youth, meaning that there needs to be better transportation infrastructure, and then also our region is safe, walkable, and accessible.
Thanks, Mulki. I'll now turn to our third main area of recommendations from the young leaders, which was nurturing the people to parks connection. And there's a few things that we're going to talk about here. One is about desirable activities, what young people would like to do in parks. Another is how parks are important to young people. And then finally, we'd like to share a model that the Environmental Stewardship Institute started with and that we worked on developing with them around the importance of environmental education. So the first thing is the learning about desirable activities for young people in parks. We do have previous research on this from the Youth and Park Study of connecting young people to the outdoors, and also the 2021 Visitor Study. It was nice to hear these things affirmed and also some kind of clear articulation of what's important. One is the importance of parks for social connection and gathering spaces. Somebody said, I grew up having picnics in the regional parks by me, and then when I learned to bike, I would bike to regional parks. Parks I can't live without because pretty much my whole life I've had at least one park that I regularly go to. Another thing, and this connects with what we just heard in the long-range plan for Battle Creek, is winter visits. One young leader from the South Minneapolis Bloomington area said, in winter, park staff encourage younger kids to interact with nature that they're in. It's free, they provide hot cocoa. For the ages who are missing, and this was specifically teenagers, all you need is proper covering up in nature. The reason that people say that there's nothing to do is that they're not teaching them how to interact during the winter. And then finally, one thing that they talked about a lot is just the restorative aspect of visiting parks, of going and doing nothing. And so one person talked about their desire to do this. Sometimes it gets super loud in parks. I wish they had a quiet area where people can relax and read books in a calm environment. I think this is not a big surprise to any of you as commissioners, but we've learned both in this, in the Young Leaders Collaboration, but also, as you might be aware, there is engagement with residents going on across the region from our housing policy plan colleagues, land use colleagues who have been talking with transportation policy plan colleagues, and we really hear how much residents value getting out in nature, the possibility of the feelings of biophilia that one has in nature. I mean, this is the extent to which nature and the regional park system is beloved in our engagement is really a striking finding. It's one of the few things I think that everybody can agree on. And so, but the young people in this project interviewed as Mulki said, young people in their community to talk about this, and here's some things that they had to say. Parks and trails create vitally needed community connection. I think that parks are places for communities to gather and connect. It's also interesting because there can be different cultural barriers in terms of accessing parks and feeling a sense of belonging in the community. They talked about how parks and trails are a place to hang out and just be in nature and how important that is to mental health. Parks are a huge part of my life. They're a place where I go to relax and rec and overall helps my mental health. And then finally, and we'll be going into this in depth in a moment, that environmental education nurtures young people's passion and care for parks. I think there should be a big effort to educate people about indigenous land. Not only there were people, but their culture as well, and how we can protect them better. So there was a strong desire to learn both the social history of the regional park system, as indicated in this quote, and also other aspects of environmental education. And with that, I'd like to turn to this model, and a lot of credit to Mulki, who worked really hard to develop this. And as we looked at how the Environmental Stewardship Institute talked about environmental education, it really emerged as something that we felt deserved additional attention. As you know, the Regional Parks Policy Plan has a list of activities, we believe that environmental education should be one that is highly prioritized based on, well, we don't believe that the Environmental Stewardship Institute young leaders talked about this. And you can kind of see this circle reflecting the ripple effect of environmental education, that environmental education for them included, as you saw on the last slide, learning social history, and also about how contemporary communities relate to nature and to the regional parks. And additionally, the opportunity for service opportunities, for park programming, for citizen science efforts. And that when these happen, there's a number of ripple effects. One important one is that it obviously increases awareness of the regional park system, but when you have when you learn about something and you become more aware, that naturally nurtures your connection. But rippling out from that, with that education and awareness, that young people advocated that would then increase advocacy for and support for the regional park system as young people became the next generation of citizens who would offer their support for funding and for protection of green space. With that increased awareness and environmental education, they also believe that that would result in increased visitation because of that new excitement for connecting with the outdoors and increased knowledge. And then finally, with the visitation and the understanding of their connection to the environment of the park system, there would be a strengthening of community bonds. And as we see, they talked about how there just weren't enough spaces to connect and be together. So we thought it was really interesting how they interconnected a lot of these positive outcomes to environmental education. With that, I'll turn it over back to Mulki.
That concludes our recommendations, so we'll open up for any discussion questions or discussion in general. So some of the questions we'd like to pose is how can the regional parks policy plan support these recommendations? Or how can the council policy coordinate to support these recommendations? Or how can our regional plan for more welcoming connections to nature for our residents?
All right, thank you. There was one thing that jumped out to me right away. Staff have heard me talk before about wanting better data about winter use in terms of visitor counts and things like that. And before, I've largely been talking about that from a funding perspective because it kind of changes our formulas for some things. But some of the ways these responses were worded really call out that winter also is important for our equity considerations. Because there's this comment about needing to be taught how to basically interact with winter and reference to cultural barriers. And it's occurring to me that your relationship with winter is very different if you're coming from a background that goes back to Norway and Finland than if your background is from Mexico or Laos or Somalia. So having much better awareness about how things are being used in winter and who is using things in winter and what they're doing in the winter is going to let us know a fair bit about how our equity outreach is working, because winter is a significant portion of Minnesota, and so if people are not comfortable with winter, then that's a significant barrier that we could relatively easily address in terms of getting back to our programming considerations and things like that. But I think it really calls out how important it is from a policy perspective and a council activities perspective that we need to know more about what's happening in winter in terms of who the visitors are and what the activities are, because it impacts not just the funding things I was caring about before, but also our equity progress. So that was the one that jumped out right at me. Other people?
Yeah, that part, and when you say, in the little circle, it's like educate first, learning. Sorry, you say it better than me. Environmental education. Yeah, I think that's very important because, like Tony says, it's not the same if you're from here or if you're somewhere else, or where you grow or what your parents teach you. If we can actually teach young kids from the beginning how to interact with nature, how to protect it, how to take care of it, why it's so important, then like you say, in the future, they are gonna be the ones wanting to protect it. Kind of like how they are, pushing now. We want, don't cut the trees. I'm with that. But I think it's something else important. Like you mentioned, winter. I like how Anthony is always trying to push people to do cross-country skiing or mountain biking, and I know you can do all those things in winter. I have no idea how, because my background doesn't explain anything about snow or icy, so I don't like it. But I tried my daughter to do it because she was born here and she should join it. And I would like to see more kids from any kind of background or ethnicity to try to do winter sports as much as enjoying nature. Because instead of, trying to use, for example, my culture as well, Latin people don't do those stuff, like stay inside. I would like to be, feel like, oh no, come here, I will show you how to do it, so that would be nice. So I like that idea. And I think all that should be in our program. Now also, I think we'll talk from Bob, you say like increase awareness. I read that one too. Yeah, we need marketing of this stuff.
And some of that gets into possible council roles Bob especially has been talking a lot about what can the council do that ties things together across the system, and what are the opportunities for that? And like park programming is pretty solidly in the realm of the individual implementing agencies, but some of these are possible opportunities for us in terms of service opportunities and citizen science, and then increasing awareness of the environment. I wonder if the council could do something at a region-wide level of coordinating those, if there's citizen science programs that might happen across implementing agency jurisdictional boundaries, or if people could sign up for a mailing list, say, hey, I'd like to be notified whenever there's opportunities to go pull buckthorn, because that's what I'm doing in my yard right now. Regardless of which agency it's with, maybe the council can have something that kind of coordinates that, because some of those things are going to be the same across all the agencies or crossing agency boundaries depending on who they're sponsored by. It's not necessarily a big, budgetary ask. It might just be a little bit of communication and coordination. That might be a good role for us to just sort of play facilitator on some of those. We're not running the citizen science program, but if somebody at the University of Minnesota is doing something and they're going to be doing some work in Hennepin County and some in Washington County, we could have some mailing lists and web pages about that kind of stuff, right?
I know Jonathan is behind the Colin, I can see him. But Three Rivers has a podcast about, how to do environmentalism, and I don't remember the name of that one. And for all the seasons, they have different science programs that you can take. So I think it will be great if everybody can see them. They're very good, right?
Yeah, Anthony.
So I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. One of the things that I would say, Tony, it's not like, so here's the deal. What organizations did you go to get the young people? So this is what I feel like we do. That the idea of introducing, and I agree, the language is very specifically right, is changing people's relationship to winter. That can happen inside every organization that is connected to cultural communities directly. It does not have to be Met Council. So the idea, if you are working with Hmong youth, if you're CAPI, or if you're like they have a direct relationship to the people in terms of their quality of life. So why not actually help facilitate that at that level? That I think that the way we structure, we're always saving kids from their families. So I believe that the family at the center of this idea is, because what you said was, I want for my daughter. I find that almost all immigrant families understand something about the culture of America, and they begin to think, how will I interface my young people? And so the supports we need are much more at a family level, and much more and that it begins to, and then what we get is we get the cultural presentation of it. You know what I mean? There's it's very subtle, but it really is. That's kind of how you get it done, and so I think that all of these. I don't think environmental education is the foundation of it. I think that environmental education is what we call it. I think that a relationship that starts very young, where young people find themselves, and parents. I told you, but I think white people in Minnesota know the secret sauce of getting your kids through law school is outdoors. I really think that is such a subtle thing in terms of youth development. And when I'm talking with communities, whether it's the Hmong community, Somali community, African American community, their number one concern is their children's well-being. That they believe that these urban environments are ruining their children. That their children are at risk for drugs and violence. And it's a very, and the answer is outdoors. For us to facilitate a family's ability to be outdoors with their kids and supporting them to make that happen. And I think it isn't at the implementing agency level. I just think it could be, and we could fund it. And that's one of the things we're starting to figure out is that what we could do is use our ambassador program. You all know Ms. Lovely, and I think that it's really interesting their ability to fund local organizations to do programming. Not us do it, but for us to partner with and fund a local culturally based family organization to do some facilitation of an outdoor experience actually winds up being more effective. It actually embeds the experience in the families that then will proliferate itself, not as a program, but as what we do. And that's like that's the magic switch that happens when all of a sudden where the family goes, where a young person had that experience and then they go, well, that's what you're gonna do. So I think it would be exciting to fund it. I think that the way that we think about it is just one degree of separation from it actually taking real roots in it, because the real roots happen inside a family and inside a community. And I think that our funding should be for organizations that are connected directly to family, to families at a community level, and that's I think that is going to make and it works, and I think that's what we're finding is our work in our communities has not been to take kids cross-country skiing, but to actually get the families, facilitate a family member who does not know how to ski to actually have an experience with their young person. But the parent is the deliverer of the opportunity. And it's such a subtle thing, the parent and the family and the cultural community itself is the deliverer of the opportunity, versus that. So getting the money direct enough is part of it. And then the other thing that I've found interesting is the idea, I was gonna ask, is there a disability piece to this? Because my own challenge I always forget that all abilities is really critical to the way that we do this. It's such a thing for us to really remember, and with young people, all abilities is one that we can deliver on because the school system is kind of really has a commitment to supporting it, and I don't think we do that as well in cultural communities as in moderate to high income earning communities, but I think, so those are my big thoughts around it, in that, again, I think that the ideas are right, but I think it's a level lower, 2 levels, 3 levels lower to families and not youth outside their own communities in terms of how we do it. And I think that that's where we get with the language of the way that we do it, because this circle I've seen many, many times. Wilderness Party has one, Moped has, we all have that, and we haven't been successful at it. And so there's something that goes lower and more grassroots in terms of how we do it. And but I still think we should fund it. And that's the part that gets tricky. I still think we should fund it in terms of how we do it. But that's what I would say.
Yeah, it ties into some of the stuff we've talked about generally in terms of barriers. There's I want to do something, but I don't know how, and I'm not sure how to get in. And you're tying into, there's a lot of things where someone may want their kid to be able to try something, but if they don't know themselves, it's harder to get. So first we have to find a way to either teach the parent or offer an opportunity where the parent feels comfortable coming in not knowing with their kid, so the kid can learn with a parent who doesn't already know.
You know what, Tony? It's a really read the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what it says? There's a really critical word in there that really is instructive for us. And I got issues, which is why I know it by heart probably. And I don't know about heart.
I certainly don't know the word exactly.
What they say is our commitment is to inspire all families to, take advantage of, benefit from, basically, it's like to inspire. Like, we should look it up so we can, and I think it's a really cool use of the word because it's saying that the issue of physical access is not it. Some of it is really people are going, and it's plain language, they go, that's just what white people do. Like, I think it's funny that all cultural communities kind of say that, like they just go, we're not going skiing, not just that park thing, that's just, like there's a practical experience of it, where they just say that, and then what that does is goes, that's not for me. And part of marginalization, part of really the social and economic marginalization that happens for immigrant communities and people with fewer needs is those things, that the barriers that you construct and that are constructed that says that's not for me. And that's the real experience that we're having. So this idea of what is the work we do in community that helps parents realize that their desire for their youth safety and their youth development and their ability to be whole adults and great humans, we believe that a great trajectory for that is using outdoors as that. and even talking with my friends from Ramsey County, I believe families believe the value of sports as youth development, that are, that work as youth development. Like that's what they, and what we're saying is no, nature, outdoors, adventure, a path towards, experiences outdoors, learning. We didn't even have to call it STEAM and STEM. It's just like some of it's like just a practical experience of young people failing and growing and progressing outdoors. Is it? And I think that language-wise, you're absolutely right. But Tony, I'm serious. I think there's something about the way we do it where we still are not helping it be what we do.
So if it's not, it's not the parts about the logistics and the learning, but more about a mentality of, is that even appropriate for me to try? How do you overcome that step to even get started?
I think that's what I mean by we work inside of the communities that are connected to the people. Like I think that if we, use, you know what I'm saying? Like you think about, like that's why I said, who are the organizations that, like obviously, in terms of great work, what do? You, in order to connect the young people who are Hmong and who are Somali and who are African American, you go to organizations that actually have a commitment to supporting Hmong, African American, and Somali children, right? That's where you start. You didn't just go to the mall and go,
But so you connect to those organizations and do what?
And you help them commit to outdoors, nature, and adventure as part of their strategy for developing the families that they're connected to.
May I make a comment? And Commissioner Taylor, thank you for that. I completely, wholeheartedly endorse what you said. That the Youth and Parks study did exactly what you said, and it showed success, that you connect families, you involve parents, and I do want to honor the recommendations of adolescents, of teens, that this was their recommendation around education, and I think to me it shows, and you may have additional insights, that a one-size-fits-all for connecting young people to the outdoors is that there needs a multidimensional model. And I will say that the Environmental Stewardship Institute that made that recommendation was primarily women. It was it was one of our few kind of multiracial, multi-ethnic, or other organizations were culturally specific affinity groups. And so it was, so there's different types of ways to connect with
Well, and I was responding to Tony saying Met Council should do, that's what I was responding to. Tony, I think you're right. We provide the money, but we don't do it. And we don't do it through the implementing agencies. And we don't, I just think we take it down to that level. Now, what I would also say is that all professionals who understand environmental education at all, or environmental justice, all use the same language. Like that, so all of us, if I'm Black or Hmong or Somali, if you hire me and I work in outdoors and environmental education, I am going to say that it is really foundational that environmental education be a part of the things. Young people would never say that. There would be some different words, and I'd love to know what they were. You know what I mean?
I could send you the raw data, Commissioner Taylor.
I would like to go, what is the word? They said, we think environmental education and environmental stewardship. And is that I would love to hear what they say without us coaching them. And not that you coach them, but I think when they, what I'm like this.
Yeah, well, I'm also looking at even just on this slide, I see the term environmental education, and there was something that happened when I was a kid in school called environmental education, and even just looking at this, I feel like those are two different things, and I don't know how to describe the difference. But I think you're hearing something that they're calling environmental education that is a little bit slightly nuanced different than what we may have come from.
Our interpretation of it, what winds up happening, when we interpret that on the slide, once the Ruiz-Barrios district gets it, it's a very particular thing.
Right.
And I wonder if it's that.
I think it's yeah, go ahead.
Chair, Commissioner. I would also just like to mention Environmental Stewardship Institute. They're experts in environment themselves. They're a youth advocacy group of some sort. So sometimes I think the language seems like it might be something like you guys would come up with it or we would, but they also are very well versed in, you know, the environment.
That's what I'm
And-
saying.
Yeah,
I'm
it's not
saying
the
that they
average
are. They're not young people who, they are versed in the same language and
Right.
in
But also,
that's-
to be
that's-
fair, in regards to winter activities, we also had a group called Raíces Latinas. They were in Richfield, Bloomington area. They were a Hispanic American group, and they also expressed a desire to have winter activities and also to go to places in the winter and have access to parks and that sense too.
I'm
So we had a varied, response.
I've never met a kid, I said this, I've never met a kid that ran from a sled or a swimming pool. It does not matter what culture or community they come from. If they're 6 years old and there's a swimming pool or a snowbank, they run towards it.
Right.
Yeah.
You cannot keep them away. They do not have to have gloves on or a coat or, I mean, it's just so we know, that's what we know, is that resistance to winter is learned behavior.
Yeah.
It is really, really important as we do the work. It is a learned behavior. It is not innate and it is not cultural.
I think,
We are probably straying a little bit from the scope of what our ask is for today. So while this is all good, I also want to bring back and look at what they're asking for. Of particularly, we're trying to do some input to the parks policy plan. Are there policy responses to what we're hearing from these youth in this particular engagement? I'm sure we'll have other stuff that might go to some other things, but for this particular subset, do we have other feedback for them at the moment? Does yours fall into that category?
yeah.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say, one of the best ways to actually support this in our policies is have a part where the youth have to say in their future. So I don't know if in our, in our 2050 plan that is coming, we should add some part with the youth, between 14 and 24, or I don't know what range will be good, but it will be a good idea, have them, for some things in the future, they should be part of it. Because after all, it's gonna be theirs, not ours. They are gonna live it more than us, so I think they should be, if not involved in the policy, because that will probably bore them to death. Probably have a say if they want to, have a way to find a path to say, I don't like this, I can't just look and send this information. I don't know.
Certainly, once we get to the stage of a public comment period, we shouldn't just be posting it on our website and assuming they'll find it. We should be reaching out to all these groups that we talked to along the way and say, hey, this is the draft we came up with, are we remotely on the right track?
Yes, and purposely look for the younger vision, just give them a really nice up-top resume. And if they want to read it, they're welcome to. I will probably love to read it when I was young, but I don't know, that will be me. Certainly not all groups will do it, but I think it will be good that we just keep listening to them, so.
There were 3 other things that jumped out at me that are related to not even just the regional parks plan, but maybe the regional development guide level of stuff. One is they're certainly preaching to the choir on the transit shortcomings. We've brought that up before, and I love seeing them call it out. But they also mentioned bike walk infrastructure, which is not within the boundaries of the park, about getting to it. I'm wondering if there's anything that we can put into the regional level policies that guide the individual community plans of when we ask them to recognize, hey, a park exists here, and a trail exists here. Is there anything that we can call out that say, hey, what are your plans for safe bike ped access to those resources at some large level? The other there was a call out about tree preservation and and we've heard about that in relation to some of the plans we've seen. I know some individual municipalities have what's called a tree preservation ordinance that says, hey, if you're gonna do a certain kind of construction and you cut down a bunch of trees, you have to plant some number of trees afterwards. And so the 2 thoughts I had on that is there something that we can do kind of region-wide? I know we have some of our park implementing agencies have at county levels a no net loss of parkland, or there might be no net loss of wetland. I wonder if we could say something at a regional level of, hey, here's our regional plan for tree preservation. And that's kind of an expectation to all of our communities of give us your thoughts on some sort of tree preservation ordinance if you don't already. And the other piece of that is if we're asking people to put together 25, 30-year plans for things, and they already know, hey, I'm gonna be doing some construction project here, can they start doing some replacement tree plantings before they cut them down so that they're not tiny little saplings when the project is done, but already starting to grow? Depending on what your construction project is, that may or may not be reasonable, but I'm wondering if we could just take advantage of the fact that we do long-range planning to say, hey, we know we're gonna have to cut down a bunch of mature trees in one place, maybe we plant some in advance somewhere else, so we can say, okay, maybe these ones are gone, but there's older ones that now exist here. Or if we were to say we're gonna move this from here to here, maybe you can already start planting some on the old side, something like that. And then the last one was, they called out a couple of times, noise pollution, wanting quiet spaces within the parks, and recognizing that. I don't know that we've really talked about noise pollution all that much in our parks before. We've talked about environmental pollution and separation of different kinds of activities and things, but I don't think we've explicitly recognized the need for quiet and being able to actually hear the natural sounds to interact with nature. And that ties in with our fundamental mission of, we talk about the nature-based recreation and what does that mean? And some of that I think is being able to experience the sound. So it was good that they mentioned that. And that's probably something we could call out in parks policy. I don't know that it's necessarily a requirement of a particular thing, but it's when you're planning, you should consider it kind of a deal.
I thought it was, that's the one that surprised me when they mentioned the noise in the park, but it would be probably back to where is your background and your culture, because I grew up in a humongous city where there is just one tree every 10 blocks maybe, and you maybe hear something. So when I'm walking on the streets even, I'm deaf to any kind of noise. So being in a park to me is like, whoa, this is so quiet. So when they say noise, I was, what noise? There's no noise in the park, come on. So I don't know, it would be something also very interesting about that. And now what I was gonna say about the trees, the problem with the start planting the trees when you're in construction is who is gonna take care of those trees. One of the biggest things about, and I love trees, you know that, but the biggest problem with, planting new trees is who is taking care of those and how they're gonna grow, and that's costs a lot of money. And I do wonder if they saw a lot of trees going down now because of the emerald ash border that we're losing a lot of ashes, plus the drought. So, but you need to put those down, otherwise we're having trouble. So I don't know if it will be something that we can just inform, kind of like, have a little, big answer. So if you see a tree down, it might have a reason behind, don't just hate the city for it or something. I don't know, I think. But I really like that they really mirror what we talk here. So I think we're going in a good direction.
Yeah, and I know like my city has guidance on if you are doing tree replacement, here's recommended species, and that's taking into account, both what's native and some of the adaptations that we're gonna need for climate change, and not doing monoculture. They say, don't plant all the same thing, do a couple of different things so that there's diseases in the future that they don't take out everything all at once. So, anything else on this, or about ready to move on?
No, but the noise pollution thing is very interesting because I think that there is a challenge inside our park system right now related to communities showing up and making noise. I think we're seeing more, it's a real thing. I would be very interesting to see how, and it is affecting cultural communities more in terms of the response, because as families come together, use our regional park systems, they want to bring music, and it's becoming a real, so I would, cautionary aspect of this is really, this is something we will have to actually visit as in our implementing agencies, especially the ones that are in the, near the cities, I think as we see more and more families visit, and we are beginning to use our parks. The large regional parks, Worth, Como, Highland, so I guess the question really becomes this thing of what is noise.
Well, it'll probably go into kind of the long-range plan step of thinking, because there will be some activities that we want that generate some noise. Anytime you have a gathering of people, it's social, that's gonna have some level of noise. but maybe we say, okay, here's kind of things that are geared towards activities that will be noisier, here are the areas that are geared towards activities that are quieter, and they're in different parts of our park, rather than just kind of mishmashing them together, and then realizing we have a user conflict. Just like, we say some trail uses are consistent with each other's and some conflict, and maybe the same thing in parks. There's user conflict in between different kinds of activities. They just need to be at different places as we plan out our layout.
I would say there are a lot of parks that are right bumped up next to the highway too, and so it's like, if I go bird watching and I'm not seeing any birds, but I'm listening for them, I can hear the noise of the highway constantly. And I mean, that's one of the parts of having beautiful spaces in urban areas. It also could be for future planning about how do we strategically, try to be more mindful about places that we want to restore that are, away from I have no idea how that would work, but I feel like that is completely something that I struggle with too, with using the parks close to my house. I love that they're so close and I can get to them by walking or biking, but that is, unfortunately, they are loud outside of just the natural places
And
that
that
are
ties into
healing.
our idea that not every park provides every experience,
Right.
so here's how we can lay out, okay, this one is known to have quiet spaces, here is known to not, and does some other things, and maybe we can communicate that better too.
I would just say, with Anthony, Brooklyn Park just have a review of the noise policy, and they ended up saying, okay, we're gonna follow the state, and I don't remember the number of the amplifier that you can actually use, which when I was measuring, it's like, my house is a daycare and it passes this noise. So it's kind of weird, and they were like, yeah, we can't, it's just, who is gonna reinforce it, how is it? It's just hard, so I will be very cautious about going and noise. In the case of music and gatherings, in the case of highways, they could always try to design more muffle around or making niches a little farther out. But I don't know. I think we live in a city; is part of it. So.
It's tricky.
It is.
Okay. Does that kind of wrap up this slide up for today?
All
Alright, thank you. That brings us on to our second information item, which is probably a little bit shorter, which is just an update on the regional development guide and regional parks policy. We have a couple of staffers talking to us about that today. Go ahead. Good.
Thanks. All right, well, I can kick this off. Thanks, commissioners. I recognize it's 10 to 6, and we can make this a little bit shorter. But we do want to hear from you on our update on the Regional Parks Policy Plan. This is, of course, part of that umbrella Regional Development Guide effort, and we are in the midst of this big guide update process. It's called Imagine 2050. So, next slide. Here is our brief agenda for this afternoon. We want to share our progress with two specific agency council work groups that we've been working hard with. One is on the park and trail plan requirements, and then the second one is the system plan consideration. So what does that mean? Hold on, we will tell you. Next, we're going to share, or I'm going to share a little bit on some draft regional parks and trails objectives. The objectives are really, I don't know if you remember those big cross-cutting 5 goals that the council's identified as like the regional priorities. The objectives help step down into the regional parks policy plan. So we've got a good draft that we've gotten some good insights on from the agencies. And then finally, just a very brief preview of 4 remaining council agency work groups that we need to launch and that we're currently teeing that up. So next slide, please. This goes to Colin to talk about the timeline.
Thanks, Emmett. Like was mentioned, we've got a timeline in front of you here. This is for the Parks Policy Plan update and the associated Regional Development Guide work. You've seen this before, so I could be pretty brief here. We've got those 4 phases you see on the top. We're nearing the end of the planning phase and hoping to move into the execution phase relatively soon. We're hoping to do that at the end of the calendar year. Planning might bump into 2024 just a little bit. We've got a little bit more planning work to do, but execution is right around the corner. Of course, we've done a fair amount of work with work groups. That's what we're going to tell you about in just a few moments here. That's a combination, especially of implementing agency staff and a couple of council staff, typically working on a variety of issues that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about on the next slide. Before we move to that slide, a couple of key dates to point out that you see in the 3rd and 4th phases in execution. We've got a draft or 60% plan complete or prepared by May of next year, not that far from now, maybe about 6 months. And then about a year from now, I guess you could call it 11 months, a final draft or 90% plan complete in October of next year. So we've got some work ahead of us, but we're making good progress. These are the now 8 work groups that we've been talking quite a bit about. The focus today is on those that are highlighted in brief: plan requirements and system plan considerations. Yeah, there's a set to come as well, and if we've got a little time, Emmett will provide a brief preview of those at the tail end of this presentation. But let's just get right into it. Park and trail plan requirements is the first of the 2 we'd like to focus a little bit of attention on today. This work group included implementing agency representation from Dakota, Scott, and Washington counties, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and Three Rivers Park District. Council staff would like to thank implementing agency staff for their work on this to date and continuing to be a part of this work. Very quickly, there is a real direct connection between this work group's work and focus and the existing Regional Parks Policy Plan. We're talking about Chapter 5 of the Regional Parks Policy Plan, the planning policy. That first strategy is long-range plan requirements. The requirement formerly known as master plan requirements, now called long-range plan requirements in our contemporary parlance. We also talked about the other strategies in this policy as well: enhanced multimodal access, joint powers agreements, and cost sharing. Agency staff generally felt like the focus should be on the first strategy. That was where a lot of the energy was focused, and so that's where we went in our work in this work group. And so those long-range plan requirements you've likely become familiar with over time as we present these business items and staff reports to you. Those staff reports include all of these requirements, 1 through 14 generally. These are the requirements for regional parks, park reserves, and special recreation features. A slightly different set for regional trails, but generally the same set. The 2 areas that you see highlighted here around demand forecast and a set of engagement-related requirements are the areas that agency staff and open space commissioners have been expressing some interest in over time. Demand forecast currently only has about 1 sentence of guidance associated with it. So we as park staff here at the council get a lot of questions about what that should look like in any given plan. On the other hand, we have a set of engagement-related requirements, some of which might have some overlap with one another. And so we're looking into different ways of sort of balancing our guidance as it relates to these requirements. And so one thing we did with our agency staff partners is to, first listen to what they had to say, what different folks in the room had to say about these sets of requirements. And you see some of that advice here. First and foremost, to streamline, to consider paring down the number of requirements, and to keep it simple. to find a balance in requirement descriptions. Kind of gave you a sense of that in that last slide. To pare down those requirements that might be lengthy or repetitive, and to expand those that might need it. Natural systems or resources should be the foundation of most plans, and therefore could be situated earlier in the plan itself. I don't know if you recall that last slide. You see where natural resources sit in the list of requirements. It's last. And ideas to move them up. Sort of that order of requirements might imply some priority or some importance. Another idea is to weave sustainability and climate action throughout the plans. Further, we should consider a matrix which lists all of the required components by park or trail type. Currently, the requirements are spread out over 8 pages in the policy plan, and as you might expect, there's a bit of redundancy there. So some folks thought this could be reduced or presented differently, perhaps more visually. And finally, you see in the upper left-hand corner there, around 10 or 11 o'clock, to use clear, plain language throughout. This is my slide with the most notes. I'm not going to go into all of this right now because we are short on time. It's nearly 6 p.m. But you see on the left side, those are the existing long-range plan requirements. What you see on the right side is a sort of a draft proposed structure. This is just a possibility. We're not necessarily proposing this set right now. This is not a final set. But through an activity that we worked through with agencies, agency staff had an opportunity to move requirements into an order or into groupings that they felt were more logical than the current set. They could propose adding or subtracting elements with good reason, of course. And again, I just want to note that this was meant to be sort of an exploratory exercise, one that was meant to encourage creativity and dialogue. We wanted to be thoughtful.
Question.
Yeah.
You know what, in this, did anyone, and actually, Tony, this is like relative to the gentleman that was talking about land, about the
Land acknowledgement.
yes, land acknowledgement, which, you know, is just kind of, but question is, did any of the implementing agencies in these things talk about reinterpretational, like, or new narratives and, or new interpretive kind of strategies? Because I feel like that to me actually is more compelling than land acknowledgements. Because it's something that literally fully recasts, you know, the trajectory of the land and the place in a way that really sees young people and people who learn a narrative about the place that we live over and over and over. And I will say also, I feel like a lot of them are doing it. So this is not an indictment of them. I do believe that Dakota County, for example, has an active, you know, reinterpretive strategy going on right now. I know, but for example, the new interpretive work at Fort Snelling has actually really been tremendous, and there's lots going on. So I was that's
like, probably what your possible new bullet of cultural landscape gets at. Both that and a couple other things that follow.
Yeah. So that's is it that specific?
Yeah, well, you know, of course, we were just sort of scratching the surface, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, in these conversations. But one of the possible additions was this notion of cultural landscape, cultural sites, cultural resources, a term that some have used previously. Those could be additions to sort of the existing set of requirements in this space, or it could be something that it is considered separately. You know, perhaps in some spaces that particular topic may take on, you know, sort of less importance, just given the location. But we were thinking about the possible connection into natural systems, some of our work that we do, agencies do, in stewardship and the requirement for natural resources there. So that's why you see it sort of situated where it is in this list. So that came up. It also came up in the discussion of sort of the grayed out portion, the planning framework or context. This is meant to be about the vision for the space that is the park or park reserve, its relationship to other plans, its role in what some call the recreation opportunity spectrum, and more. So you could see it sort of at the beginning, the front of a plan, but you could, I think you could also see that type of discussion in other parts of the plan. So again, this was sort of the results of some exploration around how those plan requirements could be organized a little bit differently in ways that make sense, that are intuitive, that sort of tell the story of the plan and of the park or space a little bit more logically. So there were kind of three main buckets that implementing agency staff came up with, and that focused in on natural systems, engagement, and development concept. We often sort of follow the engagement and development concept pretty closely in our presentation to you all in our discussions, but there was a real sort of elevation of that discussion around natural systems and of course the possible additions around cultural landscape and climate resiliency. That area that is grayed out on the top was just some, it's meant to represent some back and forth between groups, members of the work group who thought, you know, this is important information and context, but should it be required? Ultimately, the group didn't feel like it should be something that the council says, you gotta include this. More so agencies have the discretion, have the opportunity to include additional content like what you might see there. Of course, we talked a lot about programming earlier. We tend to see a lot of that. We tend to see some very detailed natural resource plans, which were present in the Battle Creek plan. It's not a level of detail that is required in the policy plan, but agencies can and do go well beyond. So this is a glimpse into the work that the agency and council work group have done. We also delved into some space where we were getting creative about how we might be able to combine various requirements within that engagement header. It was kind of a writing exercise that we can't get into the details of right now, but for example, you see partner and public engagement kind of sitting next to each other there. If you take a look at the policy plan, they're a bit redundant in that space. And could there be other opportunities where maybe we're able to look at engagement more holistically? Perhaps. So there's more work for us to do to come, and we'll plan on sharing the outcomes of that work with you going forward. But that's what I want to share with you about park and trail plan requirements right now. And if you have any additional comments or questions on this topic, we'd love to hear them. Otherwise, we'll move on to system plan consideration.
Keep moving.
Keep moving. Okay, here we go.
Great, thanks so much, Colin. Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Kinney. I'm the Senior Planner here in the Parks Unit at the Metropolitan Council. And right now, I'm going to present to you the Agency Council Work Group on System Plan Considerations. And also a huge thank you to our agency staff who participated in this work. So, we have 2 pages here. The original Parks Policy Plan touches on what we've termed system plan considerations in a few different locations, but mainly in chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3 is the system plan. It describes the different regional park and trail units and outlines their implementation phase, including the existing, open to the public, planned, and search areas. Chapter 4 is where the policy plan starts into policy. This is the siting and acquisition policy, which describes the system addition process, regional park and trail criteria, and strategies for siting and acquisition. We also reference Chapter 7 because the second strategy focuses on the range of recreation opportunities found in the regional system. So the work group discussed 7 topics before you, including both new topics and clarifications to current items in the policy plan. Here's a high-level list and a next step proposal for each. In general, the work group's proposal for the new topics are to have more conversations with the agency planners and directors, as well as you, our policymakers, to develop an approach to them. And these topics include service areas, cultural sites, and park and trail implementation priorities. The next set of topics are mainly characterized as clarifications. These topics received the thumbs up from the work group to move forward with them. Of course, this is all preliminary. These topics include consolidating park and trail definitions, adding implementing agency level maps, and clarifying the systems additions process, as well as the system level change process, which is the agency's requests during policy plan updates, which amount to system level changes. So I'll discuss more about these topics in the next few slides. This is the first topic, the service areas. So service areas are the boundaries and demographics of the regional park or trail visitor shed or public engagement area. Service areas show up in the system plan, systems addition process, and long-range plan process. Council staff have fielded questions from agency staff about what constitutes a service area and is there a regionally consistent approach. So in general, the advice from the work group that we heard was that a regionally consistent service area approach should be a suggestion and not a policy. The draft proposal for this topic includes pursuing more advice from other planners and possibly the parks directors. And this could possibly be a future planners forum topic. And further study is needed because this is a very complex issue and it may have implications that we currently don't know about. So we're going to continue to pursue that. Just an example, the service areas, the bottom table shows you a transect or a spectrum from urban to rural areas, and it's connected to different types of regional park and trail units. So I'm going to move on to park and trail implementation priorities. Council staff are interested in getting a sense of the priorities to implement the system. Exploration of this topic would consider when planned units will become public and when search areas and corridors would become planned. This question explored should we collaboratively develop an approach to show the implementation priorities with the current funding scenario as well as an increased funding scenario. The main advice that we heard from this group is that agencies are always changing their budgets and planning, and so they need to remain nimble. The draft proposal from this group is that more advice is needed from other planners and possibly the parks directors. So we will pursue those conversations and continue to develop this. Cultural sites. There are a number of examples of cultural sites from time immemorial within the region and that regional parks and trails interact with. Both agency and council staff have raised questions of how cultural sites should be approached in these instances. So the main advice that we heard from the group includes that there needs to be a conversation with Indigenous people in the area. The group's proposal includes that continued discussion is needed, and this may be a future topic at a future planners forum, and that coordination with the council's historical and cultural study is needed. And the conversation must be with Indigenous people in the area. So now we're going to be moving on to the topics that need to be clarified. So I have 2 more slides for you. So this topic here is park and trail definitions. Park and trail definitions show up in chapters 2, 3, 4, and 7. Council park staff are exploring ways to consolidate this content, reduce redundancy, and promote clarity to readers. The main advice that we heard on this topic was that the text descriptions are more robust than the figures and tables in the policy plan. So the draft proposal includes moving forward with consolidating the content with consideration of the narrative descriptions, and the recreation opportunity spectrum, and bridging facility descriptions. And we'll talk a little bit more about all these things later in the process as we keep coming back to you. This is the last topic, and all of these topics, these are 3 topics put together on one slide. All of these are about clarifying what we already have in the policy plan, with the exception of adding agency level maps. So currently, we have maps in the policy plan that include open to the public, so existing open to the public, planned units, and then also search areas and search corridors. And then we have one system level map that has everything put together. We are suggesting to add in implementing agency level maps into the policy plan to support more clarity in relation to what the park holdings of each implementing agency has. So that's just another clarifying aspect there. And the 2 other pieces here are to clarify the systems additions process within the policy plan. Right now we have a couple of statements in 2 different chapters. We'd like to put those 2 together. And then also clarifying the system level changes. So this is just adding a little bit more guidance for agency staff as to what is a system level change and how to move forward with that. So with that, these are the summary of this work group, and we can pause now and move forward with the objectives.
Thanks, Tracy. I will just very briefly cover the last couple slides. And thanks, Colin. Now it's time to get into the draft objectives that I spoke of earlier. But first, just a little contextual information. You folks have seen this before. This is basically the structure of the regional development guide. You know, starting with that big existing conditions, values and vision, goals and objectives, and then dropping into the individual system and policy plans, land use, housing, parks, transportation, and water. The Metropolitan Council members have developed the vision and values. Here are the 4 values around equity, leadership, accountability, and stewardship. So those are the sort of big values that they want to emphasize. And here are what I call the big 5 cross-cutting goals. There's a couple of vision examples on the left that I'm not going to talk about now, but the goals are really important, and that is really what provides guidance to us and you as the commissioners. The first one is our region is equitable and inclusive. The second is our communities are healthy and safe. The third is our region is dynamic and resilient. The fourth is we lead on addressing climate change. And finally, we protect and restore natural systems. So when we first saw these, as I've said, these are 5 cross-cutting goals that we can work with. This is a very busy slide, so I'm just going to kind of talk big chunks here. Those 5 goals that I just talked about are across the top banner there. Then we have 4 objectives, which step down into what are the 5 existing parks policies. So we've been given the working regional goals. Here are the 4 draft parks objectives, and we shared these with the park agencies this past week and got some really good feedback that we haven't yet incorporated into this. But the 4 objectives around equity, around better connecting people with community, natural and cultural resources to support physical, emotional, and mental well-being. The second one is really around infrastructure, the idea that we have a huge system people can rely on, renewed, maybe not repaired, that might not be the right word, and replaced park and trail infrastructure. The third objective is around climate and natural systems, combining those 2 goals from above into preserve and restore natural systems at regional parks and trails to build a more resilient region. And finally, it's really around meeting future needs, the idea that we need to acquire more land and develop new opportunities to meet the region's growing demand for parks and trails. So, you know, it's a pretty good start. Are they perfect? No, we will keep working on them, but it's going to step down then into our parks policies. And the question is sort of like, are these policies adequate? You know, I think that some of us have reflected that they're pretty good, but you know, maybe we could strengthen them, particularly in the area of natural systems and climate resilience. So I'm just going to stop there and see if there's any questions or comments. Do those objectives resonate? Do you have any quick advice recognizing at 6:15?
Commissioners?
Sitting and acquisition, sitting is what we already have.
Say again?
You know, the first one, sitting and acquisition.
Oh, siting and acquisition, yep.
Okay.
That's what we already have. Those are what is in the policy plan today. So we really have to, that's the next step, I think, in this process.
I just think the first word is kind of, well, maybe I need new glasses.
Yeah.
Sighting is, yeah.
Yep,
Location.
Yeah.
got it, it's too much,
Like, I get with acquisitions, like, oh, we own, we bought.
yeah,
Yes.
right.
And then resilient, what it is, in climate and natural systems, it says to help build a more resilient region.
Mhm.
That means like, we're gonna work around plants that are gonna survive better, trees are gonna have a better long life because of the climate change, things like that. That's what it means by resilient region, or?
I think it's both resilience of the natural things like plants, but also resilience of people living here. Keep this a place where humans want to be 50 years from now. If it's, hotter and different precipitation and things like that, what can we do to make this still be a pleasant space for us to live?
That it does pack a number of meanings into
Yeah.
that word, so,
Resilient
Should
is
maybe be a
it's a
little
busy
more.
word.
yeah.
I had a couple of quick thoughts. When you're talking about clarifying system changes and things, realize that kind of ties back to what we're talking about with long-range plans. There might be some things that we classify as things that can be administratively approved, some that go through a minor approval process, and some that go through the whole shebang with public comment and all that kind of thing. Like changing a name is probably different than creating an entire new park kind of thing.
Right.
When you're talking about cultural sites and recognition, and you mentioned conversations with Indigenous people in the area, the question that comes to mind for me is, how do we recognize and properly, credit and relate to Indigenous peoples that were formerly in the area but may no longer be, or peoples long ago where there's kind of unclear and debatable links between them and the current people, and those different kinds of relationships. It's different than just going to, here's a couple of tribes that we have contact with today and they have this thing. But when you go back in time further, things get messier. There's some groups that have been either pushed out or have kind of split and merged into other things with the way, reservation systems and displacement all worked. How do we do that with people that aren't necessarily in the community now? I have no idea. And the last one, potentially a complicated one, we're talking about service areas. Regardless of whether it's some of our current measurements of by miles or by transportation time, one thing that I've always been a little uncomfortable with is that we have this kind of just line drawn, but for me, the things that are designated as a regional resource, whether it's a park or trail, are expected to serve some portion of people that are non-local visits. We measure non-local visits, but we don't do a very good job of explaining that in the planning stages in terms of our siting and our long-range plans. We measure it after the fact, but how do we call out that one of the objectives of a regional facility is that it's supposed to serve more than just the immediate service areas. Like I don't want the service area to be seen as that's like all it serves. It might be we expect X% to come from this service area, and that's what we look at for meeting certain kinds of goals. But I would like to see some recognition that it is absolutely supposed to extend its draw somehow well beyond that. And what is it about this location, this resource, these facilities that accomplishes that and makes things really qualify as a regional thing from that perspective? And drawing not only beyond those lines within the agency, but also beyond agency jurisdiction. And I don't, that might actually be something that we call out somehow at the objective level and say, what is it that makes something a regional facility and the purpose of our regional system? Anthony.
In the, just kind of like earlier, the estimates around visitation they do includes that estimate though, right? But they don't call, that's what I'm thinking, like their estimation was based on regional.
We have an estimated visitation. I don't know if those estimates actually break it down as which ones are estimated to be non-local or not. And we also never do any follow-up to see whether those estimates are correct. So it's an area that we're kind of wishy-washy across the board at multiple levels, both in the, the system plan siting kind of stuff and in the long-range plans and in our user metrics stuff. It's all kind of, yeah, we want that, but we've never been very firm about what that means. And it could probably be fleshed out in a couple of different layers of our plan.
Okay, and I think the other question was, as you brought up the issue of we have to have conversations with indigenous communities. I think, like to your point, I think that's what I was kind of getting at around interpretation. And I was using interpretation rather than that, because because like this interpretive thing we do really describes, those communities, those that are known, who they were, the trajectory of them, and particularly the interface of, of Europeans with those communities. I mean, there's an aspect of that that does the acknowledgement of that as best they can. And it isn't, and I will say that, examples of this, where it gets weird and then it goes, well, who was here first, is what's happening in northern Minnesota, for example, with the Boys Fort communities. And then the YMCA is having communication with them, the city of Ely and those, it's just a really interesting mix that then goes, well, who was here before that community? But that's the community that we have to talk to, so it doesn't really force the implementing agency or the municipality to do the hard work of understanding as best it can the progression of people, right?
Yeah, and I know that there's, I forget what it's called, there's a state something office that's in charge of this kind of stuff for some things, and I know like they get consulted for if remains are found during a highway construction project, but also there's actually I think something that was updated the last time we did our parks policy plan to reach out to them for certain things. And I'm wondering if there's somebody in that office that maybe has guidance on kind of what they've learned, best practices, because that office has existed for a while, but I know that it's been significantly revamped under the Walls administration to do more than it used to, but I don't know a lot about what that entails. So it might be worth reaching out to them to find out, hey, what's available to us, and can you offer us advice about how to do this better?
Is it the Indian Affairs Council? I mean, just because it was really, that was the organization that kind of responded and stopped the.
This was
like the 35W stuff in Duluth that was stopped today because they found remains, and I'm like that seemed to be the anyway, but yeah, I think to your point, I think it'd be great to identify an agency and
it's the one tasked with how to, in terms of like government to government relations, how does the state interact with everybody else, and I don't remember what it's called.
Okay. Yeah, I've forgotten it, but Jonathan, what is it?
State Historic Preservation Office.
Yeah.
That's the one.
SHPO.
It was like historic something, yeah.
Not a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
That's what people, that was the joke.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else you wanted from us now?
Thank you for your time and patience with that.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
That'll bring us to reports. The one thing I have to bring up, both of you that are still here and any commissioners that weren't able to join us tonight, we do have the competitive equity grant program applications coming in soon, and we'll need a technical review committee, and we're looking for some MPOS commissioners to serve on that along with some other groups. So if you're interested in reviewing those project applications, let myself and Emmett know shortly. When is that expected to actually start?
The equity grant program has been open to the agencies. I think it's going to be open through December. The review committee will meet in like January, February.
Yeah, I'd like to set up meetings by the end of the year.
By the end of the year, okay.
So there's also potentially opportunity for involvement on that for our 2 vacant districts. Whoever's appointed to those could maybe still squeeze into it that time too.
Yes.
Okay, good enough.
Well, Emmett, if I'm here back, I'll like stuff.
Okay, we got one.
Anyone else feel it's a great opportunity?
Any other commissioner reports? Staff?
I just wanted to let you know that we are actively moving forward on the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space open seats. There will be interviews, they'll be super short. Anthony and Cecily, because you have interviewed within a year, we can just certify you, I think. I will double check that with my friend Tony in the Secretary of State's office. The other thing I just, Yep.
One of those districts has more than one applicant.
Yeah, I know. I
So
was just thinking.
you may not need to interview Anthony and Cecily again, but you will still be probably interviewing somebody else for the district and then making a decision based on that.
Okay.
But yeah, you probably don't have to actually interview them again.
The only other thing I wanted to say is that Councilmember Vento is watching online and she's been texting me. I missed almost all of her texts. She was like asking questions about Battle Creek. So I apologize for that. But she was not able to be here in person tonight, so.
You can follow up on any questions that went unanswered by email later, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll follow up, so.
All right. Well, excellent. Then thanks for your time, everybody. We're a little later than usual, but
Yeah,
now we
thank
can finally
you.
adjourn. Thanks for your patience.